How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Wow, that sounded very scripted. I don't script my videos, as you can probably tell, because I ramble and don't always know what to say. But today we're going to be working on the heads. Now, this is part one of the LS build for the 1987 Pontiac Fiero. To my right here, we have some 799 LS Cathedral Port heads. I would give you all the specs and the flow rate and all that stuff, but again, it's not scripted, so I don't have that information by me. So if you're really interested, they are the 799 heads for the LH6, I believe is what the motor is. You can go ahead and look it up if you're interested in all that information. We are going to start by lapping the valves. And then we are going to put the springs in and put the gaskets and everything on the valve covers and on the valve cover bolts. Now the motor is not ready to have the heads put on yet, and I do not have push rods because I haven't been able to measure for push rods yet because I don't have the cam or the crank or anything in the motor yet to be able to check those the lengths of the push rods. So today we're just going to be doing valves, valve springs, and seals for the heads. Why don't I take you over and show you how to lap a valve? Actually, I lied to you. Before we get started, I'm just going to show you a little bit of what I'll be using. This is the valve lapping tool I got. Not sponsored. There's no brand there. I don't know what you're talking about. But this is the valve lapping tool I'm going to be using today for lapping the valves on this motor. And what essentially lapping the valves does is, you see all of, let's see if the camera will focus on there. Yeah. See all the pitting around this edge of the valve here. So lapping the valve is basically going to be sanding that down. That's kind of a harsh way of putting it, but it's going to be cleaning up that surface and cleaning up the surface of the head so that you don't have any kind of leaking between the valves and the cylinder heads. So when they're going up and down and letting intake and exhaust into the motor, well, in and out of the motor, I guess, if it's intake and exhaust, you won't have any kind of leaks there, and your motor will just run better and cleaner. So you're going to want to start by taking your valve lapping compound and spreading it evenly, a thin layer over the very edge of the valve contact surface, so where it contacts the head and seals. I'm actually putting a lot more than I need on here. So basically you just put the nice even coat on there, and then we can start lapping the valve. Now you don't want to get this on the valve stem or anywhere else other than the meeting surface on the valve, otherwise it can mess stuff up. It's a very, very coarse compound, and it will be pretty much sanding down the valve here. So again, you don't want to get that on the valve stem or anywhere else in the whole head. Alright, so you want to put your valve into the head, make sure it's got a nice seal, and then just start spinning. And you'll hear that grinding sound, and what you want to listen for is that to get softer, and it will as you keep spinning it. It'll get quieter. And that's basically what you got to do to all the valves. You're going to have to do it quite a bit. This one's definitely not done. It's going to take a lot more. But it's about 100 degrees where I am right now, and I've got a really big fan sitting behind me. It's going to make a lot of noise. So I'm going to go ahead and shut the camera off so I don't start sweating all over it. Alright, so here is the valve that we just finished lapping. Let's see if the camera will focus on it. Come on, work with me. Really wants to focus on that head right there. All right, there. I think you can see it now, but as you can see, it looks a lot better than it did. Still not perfect, but in much better off shape. And let's go ahead and show you one that's not been done yet in comparison. So you have the lapped valve versus the unlapped valve. You can see there's a lot more pitting on the one that has not been lapped yet. So basically this is just going to clean up the valve to help it seal a little better. I am going to do a little bit more work to this one. Looks like there is still a bit of pitting on it. But basically that's the result you're looking for, is to get rid of that pitting on the lip. And it also gets rid of the pitting on the contact point for the valve on the head. So where the valve sits in the head, it cleans that up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these up, and I'll get back to you guys once that's done. We're going to take some oil on the valves and put a little bit of oil on all the valve stems as we install the valves, just so they're nice and lubricated. I just shot oil all over my head. This way it just prevents corrosion and unnecessary wear while we are working on the rest of the motor. So just go ahead and one by one put each of the valves in, and then we will flip the head over and start on the valve seals. Alright, now that we got our valves in, let's go ahead and flip the heads over, take off the valve covers, and start with the valve seals. I got some Brian Tooley valve seals here. I am using Brian Tooley beehive style springs, so I'm using an aftermarket seal for those. So what you're going to want to do is take your seal and a large socket that fits right over the top of the seal and only hits this little collar here. Going to want to set your seal down onto the valve, set the socket over, and take a hammer and do a very, very light couple taps just to make sure your valve seal is seated flush and proper, and you won't have any leaks there. Once you have your valve seals in, next thing you're going to want to do is put on your valve springs. But before you can put on your valve springs, you have to decide what kind of valve spring compressor or valve spring tool you're going to use. I have a few different options here that I'm going to show you and give you my personal opinion on them. First one is going to be this standard little valve spring compressor that you can get on any auto parts store like O'Reilly's or AutoZone. Really the only thing I can say about this is I absolutely hate it. I will never use this again. I actually picked this up when I had a valve spring break on my G8 in the middle of Georgia, Dublin, Georgia to be exact. I'll see if I can find a picture of the broken spring on here. But this tool is terrible. It does not compress the spring enough to actually get the retainer on there, and once it does compress it enough, the spring tends to pop out. I actually had to wrap this thing with rope to keep it from slipping off the spring when I was trying to get the valve spring on there, and using this tool took me 6 hours to get back on the road in Georgia once I had a spring failure. So basically, if you want to question why you ever wanted to work on cars and hate yourself for a very long time, go ahead and buy this tool. Next one here is going to be this standard bar style spring compressor. I got this one from Summit Racing in Georgia after I had the issue with that tool. I went to the Summit store on my way through and I picked this one up. to change all the valve springs when I got home. Couple little things with this one. It was a little too wide for the valve seats on the or the valve spring seats on the valve springs in my car, so they would slip to the side and pop off, so the compressor would lose grip. I actually ended up filling the corners with hot glue, if you can see that, to keep the head of the spring from shifting side to side. And then the other downfall to this one is you're putting so much force compressing the spring on it that any bolt I put through here was getting bent. I went through a bunch of bolts trying to get the springs on with this one. It does work a lot better than that one. If you have the choice between this one and that one, definitely go with this one. But make sure you have some pretty good grade 8 bolts to put in there that aren't going to bend too much or flex or strip out the holes for your rocker arms. And the last tool, which so far I am really like, that I've been using, is this one off of Amazon. It was about $48. I don't know if you can see that in there. But basically what this one is it bolts into the head, and then it has a little compressor that compresses 2 springs at once. You just tighten the bolt, it compresses both the springs, you can put your stuff on there. So far it works really well. I used it to take all the springs off of these heads. I haven't actually used it to put springs on. So we're going to go ahead and do that now and see how it goes. Alright, so we have our Brian Tooley Beehive style valve springs there. We've got our valve spring compressor tool right here. Got it. Almost dropped that. 13mm deep socket and a 3/8 drive ratchet. Let's go ahead and see how this works. Now, like I said earlier, this is the first time I've used this tool to put springs on. I've used it to take them off before. So this is going to be a first time for both of us. All of us. It depends on how many people are watching. Probably just both of us. So let's go ahead and... This aluminum piece sits down in the base here. You're going to take one of your bolts with a lock washer, thread it all the way through there. Takes a little while. Alright. Then this sets right here. You want to put your valve spring retainers right on your springs. Make sure they're centered there. Grab another 2 bolts with a couple washers. Thread them down into here. Then you're going to grab this top piece, slide it right over the retainers like that. It'll hold them in place. Make sure everything is centered up. Throw your last washer on there, and your nut. Again, make sure everything is centered. And you can start compressing the tool. Sorry about the shaky video. The quality of the table I am using is not the greatest. Go all the way down with the nut. And as you can see, this valve is down while this one is sticking up. You're going to want to go ahead and lift the head and try and pop that valve up. This one is stuck. I might have to loosen the tool and adjust it. Looks like we got this side free, but now the other side is stuck.
So it looks like the major flaw with this tool, I'm learning, is getting things lined up properly so that you can get the springs down and not get stuck on the valves. Looks like I got both of them lined up now. That's all tightened down. Let's make sure the springs are all the way up. And they are. Go ahead and grab your keepers. Throw them in there. And then as you're coming up with the tool, you want to make sure the keepers stay aligned on the valve stem so that they hold the springs in place. Which generally, if you have it right, they should just keep themselves aligned. Which I obviously didn't have it right because mine just fell out. I'm going to tighten this back down, throw a different one in there, and we'll find that one once we have the tool off. All right. Now the question of the day is, there it is, I see it. Fell underneath the head. We got our keeper out. Go ahead and throw that back in the magnetic tray. Now what you saw there with me struggling with that is these notches here fit really tightly over the keepers, so they get stuck on there. You kind of have to pry it off. It's not going to damage them. So my consensus is that out of all three of the tools I've used, this one is still my favorite. It works better than the other two. It's faster, it's easier. It does take a little bit getting things lined up, but once you have it aligned, it's fairly smooth. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of them in now. Alright, now that we know what we got to do, that one went in quite a bit smoother. I did have a little difficulty with this side here. The valve was a little bit stuck, didn't want to go up, so I couldn't get the valve keepers in all the way. But I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of them off camera. Just so I can get it done and turn my fan back on because I am sweating over here. So I will get back to you guys once this is done. Alright, we got all of our new valve springs installed. Now we are going to take our coolant temp sensor and put it back in the head. That goes onto this one right here. Put a little thread tape on there just to keep it from leaking at all. And I did get a complete seal kit for this. So everything you see me putting on has new gaskets, new seals, new everything on it. So don't be alarmed if you see something. It's probably got a new gasket on it or something. Nothing old is going on this other than usable parts. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put our valve cover seals onto our valve covers. Put the valve covers onto the head. Put the valve cover bolts seals on. And then bolt everything together because that's about as far as we can go with the heads until we're ready to get them onto the engine block and get all of that sorted. Alright, and that's going to be it for the cylinder head portion of this. they're all set until we're ready to go ahead and put them on the engine blocks. So I think that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you have any comments or suggestions, definitely leave them down below so I can read them. That's the only way I'm going to get better, is to see what you guys are saying and be able to improve. But that's it for the heads. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.